For some more reflections on the 12 years after Marikana, I'm now joined by Giwusa President Mametlwe Sebei. Mametlwe, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. What is Giwusa's current stance on 12 years on since the Marikana massacre?
Well, it is a fact that not only justice has not been done, and of course, not only in terms of holding individuals accountable, but ultimately, many people who occupy the top echelons of the state, because Marikana was a premeditated act of a political mass murder by the state, as by a lone mill, on the basis of a consciously designed, planned police operation approved at the top echelons of the state and lone mill management. That's the first thing. So it's a question of what are we doing about Ramaphosa, right? What are we doing about Jacob Zuma? What are we doing about the Minister of Police? What are we doing about every single one who was involved at the level of decision-making that led to this bloody confrontation and the massacre of the workers in the post-1994 period? But also think that of much more important for us is the fact that the unresolved contradictions and the crisis that created conditions for Marikana not only have they not been resolved, but actually have widened and deepened ever since 2012. When you look at the conditions of the mine workers themselves, reality is that many mine workers have lost income, particularly during COVID, alongside all workers across the economy. Workers' benefits are under attack. Housing allowances, food allowances, transport allowances. Basically, the quality of income and the standard of living of workers are falling in the face of the cost of living crisis. But also, it is about the fact that the levels of unemployment have more than doubled. Almost doubled ever since 2012. You had 4.6 million people who were unemployed in 2012. Today, the unemployment level is at 8.4 million, excluding 3.2 million people who have given up on finding employment. The housing crisis, the collapse in terms of services, access to energy, access to water, access to housing, and every other measure of the quality of life says that we are going backward. Wealth is being transferred to the rich. They are getting more richer, whilst the working class is becoming more poorer. Hence, South Africa has become the most unequal society, much more worse today than it was in 2012.
Now, during those commemorative celebrations that took place today in Rustenburg, AMCU's President Joseph Mathunja made mention of the persistent economic divide that you're speaking of now, but he also highlighted that even MPs are earning as much as 1.2 million rands as opposed to what people on the ground are earning who are doing the actual jobs. He highlighted that there have been gains in the pay of gold mine workers over the years since the tragedy due to AMCU's intervention in terms of pay.
It is an even process, right? There are certain sections of the mine workers, especially those that fought, who certainly made advances, but those advances came against a background of a very bitter class war in the mining industry, not only in 2012, in the wave of strikes that followed Marikana, but also continued in 2014. It is also the question of, the strikes that had happened ever since that time and so on. But when you look at number of or sections of the mine workers, in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, a quite number of areas where the movement or which were not affected by those or by that particular movement. The workers in those mining sections, alongside the workers across the economy, in the chemical industries, in the metal, in the motor industries, many of the workers have lost income. And in the context of COVID, it's not only the question of it wasn't just a question of, their wage increase not keeping up with inflation, right? You had a situation wherein many of the workers had their wages frozen, had their benefits withdrawn, and in some cases, many workers faced a savage cuts. You just have to look at the situation at Clover, where workers lost up to 62% of their wages. But it's not just Clover workers. It's workers in a number of industries. Workers in the motor industry, for instance, were condemned, or rather, their wages were slashed and reduced to a minimum wage of 20 rand, that's about 2-3 years ago, and so on, right? Meaning, therefore, that you had about 50% erosion in their wages and so on. So the point that I'm trying to make is that overall, the working class has lost massive wealth in this whole period since Marikana. And this is not only true on the workplace. You also have to consider that we're talking about social wage as well. Because the Marikana struggle wasn't just about 12 rand. It was about the housing conditions. It was about where workers lived. The fact that they had no access to electricity, the fact that there was no water supply, the fact that there were no roads at Marikana. And that is true of many working class areas where a housing crisis means 13% of the population in this country are living in informal settlement without access to water, without access to electricity, without access to basic sanitation and services. So these are the realities that we say means 12 years after Marikana, not only nothing has been learned, if anything, the working class has gotten worse, the inequalities have widened, and I think this is a call, in our view, for working class power, for revolution, and for socialism.
All right. Thank you so much for those contributions with regards to Marikana.